All right, let's keep the discussion going. Joining me now for more, Vice Chair of the Center for American Security for America First Policy Institute and former Chief of Staff with the National Security Council, Fred Fleitz, and Arizona GOP congressional candidate, former U.S. Navy Lieutenant Commander and the founder of American Islamic Forum for Democracy, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me tonight. Appreciate it.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
All right, Fred, let me ask you this. We just heard, Iran, they're pushing their radical groups to fire on American troops. This is in Iraq, so this is in Syria. What are we doing about it? Because from what I understand so far, we had one feckless strike to two warehouses that supposedly had munitions. They might have been emptied. Nobody knows. But it doesn't seem like much at all. And certainly, if it was supposed to be a deterrent, it failed.
Well, first, I want to say it's quite an honor to be on the air with Dr. Jasser, who I consider an American hero. We're not doing enough to respond to these provocations by Iran. There were pinprick airstrikes last week. This simply showed weakness by the United States. It was followed by more attacks. If we're going to be serious, if we want to keep these U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria, we have to strike the leadership of these Iran-backed militia groups in Syria and Iraq and have to do some serious damage. If we're not going to do that, we have to pull our troops out of Syria and Iraq because they're simply being endangered beyond any reason if we're not prepared to defend them.
Commander and Doctor, the Hamas leader is on a flight right now to Iran. How concerned should we be?
Well, I think also we need to understand the urgency of what's happening from Iran's perspective. Why did this happen now? I wrote a piece about this a couple days ago, and the bottom line, it's not about the Palestinians. Hamas couldn't give what about the Palestinians. It's about the Islamist movement. They're working with the Shia Khomeinists to try to burn up the Middle East because they have an opportunity now with the Biden administration still a year away and a year in power, and they're feckless. They have proven to be weak. So the Shia crescent through Iraq, through Syria, into Lebanon has an opportunity now to create rebranding of the jihadi movement across the planet. And now we're seeing activity across the region. So this is why they're moving on multiple fronts. They don't care whether they lose or not. Yeah. And that's why Israel has to act quickly. And as Fred said, we have to act quickly in response for our own troops in Syria and elsewhere, because they're going to continue to move on however many fronts they can to inflame the region and rebuild the jihadi brand that was lost after Al-Qaeda was decimated, after ISIS was decimated, right, and now Hamas comes back.
Right. Commander, I don't think the average American understands the complexity involved and what is really going on behind the scenes. They're looking at one little moment in time and not understanding the bigger picture. But, Fred, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, is not a fan of this ceasefire. He's rejecting Biden's wishes. Thank goodness he is. He's not going to pause the fighting. I think he's on the right path here, and I think President Biden needs to stand down because it's coming to our shores as well. What do you think about that?
You have to really feel for spokesman John Kirby when he tries to explain that these pauses that Biden is calling for are not ceasefires, and it's okay to ask for these so-called ceasefires when they're only on one side, that only Israel would stop fighting, but Hamas would not, and that's okay. This doesn't make any sense. These Hamas terrorists killed over 1,300 Israelis, and Israel is not going to stop fighting until it feels safe. And it's time for Joe Biden to grow his spine and stand with our close ally. There can't be daylight right now between Netanyahu and Biden. And I was sort of worried this was going to happen, and I just think Biden is concerned about criticism of him on MSNBC.
Yeah, well, he doesn't have a great track record when it comes to foreign policy. With less than a minute left, Dr. Jasser, let me ask you this. Everyone is asking me constantly throughout my day, is this conflict going to get bigger? Is this going to be World War III? What role is the U.S. going to play? What do you think?
Well, if it wasn't the Democrats waging a war, I think it would not get bigger. It would be finished in the next few weeks. But the problem is we saw ISIS triple its size during the Obama administration, and then it took General Mattis and the Trump administration and Fred to finish it off within 6 months. So, this is the difference, is that right now we have folks that insist on fighting wars with their hands tied behind their backs, telling our allies like Israel things that we would never have been told when we were waging a war against al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Imagine somebody saying, worried about collateral damage, etc., when we need to knock them out from their holdings in Afghanistan and then in Iraq. Nobody would have ever said that, and yet we're saying the same thing to Israel. So I'm afraid that it is going to expand because of the weakness with which we're addressing the problem.
I wish I could disagree with you, but I just can't, Commander. So Fred Fleitz, Dr. Jasser, thank you very much. Appreciate your input.
Good to be here.
Thanks.
And coming up, President Trump asking a federal appeals court to pause the limited gag order issued by U.S. District Court Judge Tanya Chutkan. We'll dive into the latest details when Frontline returns.